Welcome back to Learn Your Stripes. I'm Ryan Guillory.
And I'm Michael Moran. We're going to start by discussing last episode's play. A44 is running around near the sideline. While a pass is made to him, he accidentally steps on the sideline, leaps, muffs the pass while airborne, returns to the ground in bounds, grabs the ball, lands on his knees with the ball secured. So trying to paint this in our minds here, imagine that receiver stepping out of bounds and jumping straight up, and at that point he then touches the ball and then completes the catch while coming back down in bounds. It's the picture we're trying to paint. And this is going to be an incomplete pass. And the reason for that is A44 touched out of bounds, so he didn't have a chance to reestablish himself in order to complete that pass legally. Now, had he gone out of bounds on his own, like this play is suggesting, and then come back in and touch the ball, we might have a different scenario, like a foul.
Right, especially at the high school level. So even though this play, it's written to talk about a player who's has position out of bounds when, or he's last out of bounds when he touches the ball. This is one of those where it's always important to know how the player goes out of bounds, right? So if he is back in bounds before the muff here, before something happens in bounds, we need to know, was he forced out? Did he go out on his own? Did he come back in and reestablish? And think through the differences here if you're working high school, working college, and how we're going to rule on that. So to the extent you can know how they go out of bounds, which, to be honest, in 5-man, that can be awfully difficult sometimes to have your head on a swivel enough to go from tackle to back to seeing a receiver on the sideline. But, it's all about doing your best. And if you have information, you have information and can use that. This week, we're going to cover the 2022 rule changes for both high school and college football. We think this is a good time to do so. Obviously, everybody should be in their rule books year-round, but especially now in the spring as we're getting ready for summer. Scrimmages will be here before we know it, and quite frankly, the season's going to be here before we know it. So it's a good time to drill down, get sharp on rules. Obviously, you want to brush up on mechanics as well, but make sure that we're solid on the rules as well as the new rule changes. And as usual, we're going to start with the new high school rules.
So here in Indiana, it's the middle of May, and we're about 90 days away from week one. So good chance to get back into the rule book if you've been out of it for a little while. So one of the new rules this year is the team box can be extended by state association if you adopt that. Previously it was 25-yard line, and now we can go beyond that. I think this kind of stems from the COVID years that we had going on. I know we extended, I think, 1 year down to the 10, but I don't know that we've had anything since then, Ryan.
No, yeah. I mean, it was strange because in 2020, we had the extensions well beyond the 25. I can't remember if it was the 10 or the 15. The 10 sounds right. Maybe it was the 15, but quite frankly, what's it matter at this point? But last year, we went back to the 25. So it was kind of odd to go, from the 10 or 15, whichever it was, back to the 25 when college moved it to the 20s permanently. So this is just sort of the high school catching up really with the college level to giving state by state the right to go beyond the 25-yard line if they so choose. So this may be applicable in your state this year. It may not. Just pay attention to what your state association is doing as to this.
So another rule change we have going on this year is that any game official can now have a ball be changed between downs. Previous in the rule book, it just talked about the referee being able to do that. I know our crew's been a little more lax in some of that, especially as a short wing. You're getting that ball, relaying it back into the umpire. Maybe it's rainy and you're wanting to be cognizant of that so teams can run their offense. But now it's specifically called out the rule book that any one of the 5 officials can call for a ball to be changed.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't seem like that drastic of a rule change. I, quite frankly, never really thought that this was something limited to the referee myself. Nope. Anyway. In the heat of battle, I don't think this is one we've thought about a lot.
And then we've seen it in the college ranks, and now it's coming down to high school. We can now use 0. So just for fun, it's Rule 143 if you want to take a look at that when the new books come out. But 0 is now a legal number by itself, but you can't have something like 01 or 09 or 05. It has to be 0 by itself. Obviously, you can still have 50 for 50, right? We can still do that, but no 0, no double 0, and no leading 0. So another rule that's been brought in is more of a safety foul. It's defining a chop block, and it's been redefined as a combination where the contact is made above and below the waist. Previously, it was just based upon the defensive player's knee as kind of a litmus test there in terms of a high-low block and another using the waist. Just trying to make the game a little bit more safer.
Yeah, and I think this makes it easier on whether it's the umpire or the referee looking at this to just envision it, because you can still have a bad injury with a hit just above the knee. So we're trying to take away those kind of plays out of the game for safety purposes. And so a hit that's just above the knee can be as dangerous as a hit just below the knee. So now a chop block is going to encompass everything that's below the waist, and hopefully make that a little bit simpler and hopefully make the game a little bit safer. Rule 347. Rule 3, of course, is one of our timing rules. So this rule change applies to the offended team's game clock options after a foul is committed with less than 2 minutes remaining in either half. Any such foul that's committed within the last 2 minutes of either half will now automatically result in the offended team's option to start the game clock on the snap. Before this, the offended team was required to accept the penalty in order to gain control of the game clock. Now, just if there was a foul committed, whether it's accepted or not, that offended team is going to have the option to have the clock start on the snap as opposed to on the ready, and try to, from their perspective, conserve some time in those last 2 minutes of each half. There's another clock change rule this year. There's a new exception to play clock administration after there's a foul committed by the defensive team. This includes an exception for Rule 357I that mandates that a 40-second play clock be employed following a foul committed only by the defensive team.
We're probably all used to the 25-second play clock, so definitely something you can pregame on Friday nights driving to your site to get used to that.
Yeah, this is sort of one of those rules that gets us a little closer to thinking about college. Because if there's a helmet off or an injury or such, or something happens late in the half, we go to a 40-second clock if it was the defense, or a 25-second clock if it was the offense. Here, this is giving us a 40-second play clock after a foul committed by the defensive team. So that's going to be a little bit different because, we've been used to in high school for so long. If there's a penalty, we're going to have a 25-second clock. We're going to chop it in. It'll either start on the ready or the snap, depending on the result of the play before it. So it'll take a little getting used to, and it might be a little choppy as we go, but just something to keep in mind that this is going to be applicable only to fouls committed by the defensive team. One of the big changes this year, and probably the biggest rule change in high school for some time, maybe since the addition of the 40-second clock, is a new exception for intentional grounding that brings high school football really in line with college or the NFL. So this allows a player to purposefully throw an incomplete forward pass without an intentional grounding penalty, so long as the passer is outside of the pocket, and that's going to be defined as the lateral boundary of the free blocking zone, and the pass reaches the neutral zone, or the extension of the neutral zone, but beyond the sideline. So this is sort of what we hear when you're watching college football or the NFL. You see a quarterback scrambling, throws it away. And one of the first questions is, was he outside of the tackle box? So although this rule says free blocking zone, the easiest way to envision this is the box that's bounded on both sides by the tackles, right? So number one is the quarterback outside of the tackle box. The second component of this is that the ball has to reach the line of scrimmage. Now, it can either cross the line of scrimmage in the field of play, or it can cross the line of scrimmage, basically at the stands, right? And one of the things that we always hear, I know Michael and I hear with this when we're trying to think through this or enforce it in college, is that we don't want to be overly technical with this. If it's close to reaching the neutral zone, we're going to say that it's reached the neutral zone. And then the only question is, was he in or outside of the tackle box? So here, this is going to be a big change, I think, largely for the referee, because the referees now is going to have to be thinking through the tackle box. And then for the short wings as well, because the short wings can help to come in with information as to where the pass was thrown from. Did it cross the neutral zone? So I think this is going to be probably the biggest change that we'll see this year, one of the biggest changes in years. And it's going to take some getting used to, but it's going to take the whole crew working together to be mindful of this. Any thoughts on this change, Michael?
I think the other thing, too, is don't change your mechanics too much, because one thing that's still going to buys a quarterback out is if he has a receiver in the area. And I think as a short wing, we've all I say we as short wings rather have been used to trying to help our referees if there was a receiver in the area, and that's something we do at the high school level and at the collegiate level as well. So if there's that running back out in the flat, or you've got a receiver kind of over on the sideline, and they're in the area, use your good mechanics, point to the receiver, and let your referee know, hey, I've got somebody in the area. That obviously buys them out too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Obviously, this rule change only applies if there's not a receiver in the area. So it's sort of for our famous term that we use in lots of different ways in football, it's a two-step process, right? Is there a receiver in the area? Yes. Then you don't have intentional grounding. Is there a receiver in the area? If it's no, then that's where did the ball cross the neutral zone? Was the quarterback outside of the pocket? That's where this comes in. So don't make it harder than it needs to be. It's already a difficult enough game to work. If there's a receiver in the area, go with that. And let's move on to the next play.
I'd say too, your referee can always drop a beanbag down, right? Because we need to know where that spot is. So if you need to drop a beanbag and then go have a conversation, then you can come back and then drop a flag if one's needed. If not, next play.
Yeah, another thing that I learned at one of the clinics I went to this year was that let's envision us on a Friday night, right? So quarterback's rolling towards you, Michael. He throws it. You don't have a receiver in the area, so you're coming into the referee to talk through, number one, I don't have a receiver in the area. The ball crossed the line of scrimmage. Was he in or outside the tackle box, right? So you and the referee are going to be busy with that. So the backside short wing can come in and take the spot where the pass was thrown. Okay? And so obviously it's going to be a little bit easier with 7-man, but I think it works for 5 officials of 5 as well. So going through that play scenario, you and our referee, you're going to be busy going through this, right? I'm not really going to have much information. If the ball crosses near you, 53 yards away from me, I'm not making that judgment call. So I don't have anything else to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to stand on that spot where I saw the quarterback throw it from. You and JP, or, for whatever other crew, that short wing and your referee, you can get together, talk through this, but that backside short wing that has nothing better to do at this moment can sit there, hold the spot. If it's determined it didn't cross the line of scrimmage, then, at that point, the referee's not going to have to try to think through, well, where did he throw it from? Was it in or outside the tackle box? Instead, you're going to have an official standing right there. So hopefully it makes that a little bit more efficient and a little bit easier. There's also going to be 3 points of emphasis this year. These are very broad categories. I don't think they're any different than points of emphasis that we've had for the last, I don't know, pick a number, that number of years. But the points of emphasis this year, number 1, targeting and defenseless players. That's been an emphasis for a while. It should continue to be an emphasis. Number 2, legal uniforms and equipment. I know for us in Indiana, that's really been hammered home, and I think around the nation as well. Obviously trying to get jerseys down, make sure pads are legal, pads are covered, knees are covered, all that good stuff that we love doing so much when we're out on the football field. And finally, sportsmanship. Sportsmanship is a continuing issue for officials, for coaches, for players, for fans. It's been an issue for a few years, and it's going to continue to be a point of emphasis this year. So those are the high school rule changes and points of emphasis for 2022. Of course, there's going to be some college rule changes as well. So to get started on those, I'm going to turn it back over to Michael.
Yeah, so on the college side, one of the big things that has been noticed is the feigning of injuries, right? A lot of teams running up tempo, and if you look, you can find some clips out there of, shall we say, defensive players going down. Now, it's not up to us to determine if the player's been injured or not. That's not a realm that we want to be in. So we're going to continue our mechanic of calling for a timeout. It's going to be a timeout for us, the officials. The medical personnel will come and attend to the players they need. So it's out of our realm. It's out of our hands. It's not something we want to get into. However, now there's an allotment within the rules, since this is kind of contradictory to the rules, and it's not really in the name of sportsmanship like we just talked about. For any sort of questionable game action, a conference has the option to consult with the national coordinator officials, who can then facilitate a video review, and then after that review, they can communicate anything that they might find to that conference or to the school, and then we can go from there. And that there's a reference in the coaching ethics, and I can't say that I've read the coaching ethics, so to any coaches that are listening, you might know what that is. But again, kind of going back to sportsmanship, that's what this is about, and trying to make sure we're all playing the game for the sake of playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, as officials, as Michael said, we're not making judgment calls. I mean, it can be, there's times where it's pretty obvious, right? You've got the clock running down, you've got defensive players looking at the sideline, and all of a sudden two of them act like they just, bomb went off between them, right? You're pretty sure they're not injured, but that's not our call. If they're down, we have to protect them. But you can make a note on your game card as to the time. So if there's some issue later to be looked at, you've got some record of that. Yes. But beyond that, we're not getting involved in making a judgment there. It's going to be up to the national coordinator officials, the conference, and the schools to deal with at that point.
Absolutely noted. It's not going on your penalty report, but if you're submitting that, either, if you're getting graded, write that down, make note of it, just note what you saw. Be simple, be objective about it. Third quarter, 2:31, number 23 went down, whatever, something that simple. So another rule change, and this one's going to be, speaking of judgment calls, this one is going to require a little bit of judgment. So remember how I said it's not our judgment to make this decision? Well, now this next one, it is our judgment to make this decision. So there may have been a play that folks might have seen where a quarterback for a particular school was running and began to attempt to slide, and the corresponding defense then stopped and pulled up, and then this quarterback, or ball carrier, I guess I should say, took off. And what I've seen was the first fake slide that I've ever seen, and it was absolutely spectacular. But given the nature of the game and how fast it is now, and a lot of the rules trying to protect players, we're going to cut that out this year. So new rule 413R: a ball carrier who slides feet first is protected as defenseless and is considered down as soon as they're lowered. So the addition of this rule: when a ball carrier obviously begins a feet first slide, at any time the ball carrier simulates or fakes that feet first slide, the ball should be declared dead. That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be times where it's close. It's, going back to the play that sort of brought all this about. Quite frankly, it's an amazing feat of athleticism. I can't imagine being out on the football field running like that, having players coming to tackle me, and having the wherewithal at the moment, but B, the athleticism to be able to pull that off as well. But as short wings, this is something that we've dealt with on the line of scrimmage, right? When that quarterback's doing that feet first slide, because usually in the past, this play has been for a quarterback. It could apply to a running back as well. But it's typically going to be the quarterback who's trying to get down to protect himself. So the ball is dead as soon as that butt dips and he's starting to go to the ground, right? So it's not where he ends up or where he strikes the ground. As soon as that motion starts, the ball's dead and it's placed right there. So essentially what this rule is saying, once that starts, whether he hits the ground or not, it's dead where that action started. So it's going to be a little bit harder for the short wings if you can have somebody who can fake this to try to figure out, did he make that attempt to go to the ground and pull up? But if you see that dip, whether he commits to it and goes all the way or picks back up and takes off, the ball's dead where that started.
Well, I'm with you, Ryan. I think it was absolutely incredible in terms of athleticism, and I kind of applaud the rules committee for getting ahead of this. I don't know that we'll see it again, at least for quite some time, obviously now with the rule change. But we've spent the better part of a decade here trying to defend this position, and rightfully so. So I think it's good for the game to not allow it to be taken too much advantage of there with fake slides and trying to beat defenders. And you can get into the world where the defender might think he's faking a slide now and is going to come in harder than he needs to. So I think it's a good player safety as well.
Yeah, I mean, because going back to this play, and not to harp on this too much, but the defenders who pulled up did what they've been taught to do. They followed the rules. They saw a quarterback start a feet first slide, and he just had the athleticism to be able to pull up out of it. But the defenders did what the rule that was in place. They did what it was intended to do: pull up and not take that headshot or have extra action on that quarterback. So that rule has obviously worked. This new rule just really closes a loophole that I don't know that a lot of people thought was there to start with, but learned on national TV in a pretty big game. Actually, that loophole exists, and we need to get that closed up.
And it is the ball is one thing I'll note: the ball is dead. So we're stopping play. So anything that
Right.
happen, any foul, there's no foul for the offensive player attempting that slide or
Right.
faking that slide, but you could have a potential dead ball foul after that. So
Correct. Right. Yeah, it's just like if the player completes the slide, you could still have targeting. You could have some other personal foul. So all of that's still in play. It's just that now we're just killing it, and it becomes a dead ball, whether he hits the ground or not. Once that feet first slide is initiated. Another rule change this year, a fairly simple one. This one really applies solely to the penalty aspect of a play. Deals with an illegal block or contact that's made on a fair catch. For some time, the rule or the penalty has been that a receiver that makes a fair catch signal during a kick and subsequently blocks his opponent has committed a foul. It wasn't considered a personal foul, yet it was still a 15-yard penalty. Now the penalty is going to be changed to 10 yards. But if there's any personal foul committed in conjunction with that blocking action, the personal foul penalty enforcement is still going to be followed. So you could still have a 15-yard penalty here, but it would have to be some separate personal foul. The simple act of making a legal block or contact after giving a fair catch signal, that's now just a 10-yard penalty.
Yeah, just something to be aware of either back judge or deep wing. It's a brief change. A lot of times guys are calling for a fair catch and they'll get out of the way, but just in case they're feeling squirrely or it's a rivalry game and they want to go up and block somebody, we've got this change in here. So
yeah. We're going to have another penalty change this year on illegal touching. So illegal touching is now going to include a loss of down. So if you think back to the general rule here, what is illegal touching? It's when an originally ineligible player who's in bounds intentionally touches a legal forward pass before it has touched an opponent or an official. In the past, it was just a 5-yard foul. But I think adding the loss of down makes some sense here because instead of giving them another shot, it was an illegal play. So it's sort of in the same vein as the general loss of down fouls that we have on offense. So illegal touching is now going to be both a 5-yard foul and a loss of down. So not a huge change, but one that I think makes sense and one that, quite frankly, a lot of people probably thought was the rule before now anyway.
It's easy to mix those up. When you're talking about illegal touching and illegal forward pass, all those are right in there. So I encourage everyone to spend some time on Rule 7 there to get through those and try to sort those out. Because when you're on the field, we don't have our rule books handy, and it's important to know what scenario has what applications, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a couple bigger penalty changes. So for the hard ones, I'm going to turn those back over to Michael.
One of them is targeting. I think most of us have been working college by now. We know 913 and 914. Right? Those are some big ones. They're in all of our study sessions. We see them in all our film reviews. It's the safety foul we've been working on to try to get this right for a decade, and I think they're continuing to do a better job getting into it and making this game safer for players. So the change in the penalty this year is trying to make things more accurate if there's any sort of carryover for the disqualification in games involving replay. At our level in the Heartland Division III, we don't have replay. So I can't say I'm very well versed in it. I know that's no excuse, but for those of you that do have replay, there's a good note there to take attention to. So it's still a 15-yard penalty. So if there's a postseason game and the player has some eligibility left, then a targeting foul could still apply or still could carry over. So that's really what this rule change is doing, is just shoring that up, making it more consistent. So, Ryan, I know we both have seen our fair share of targeting, but never had to get replay involved. So I don't know if you have any experience on that.
No, I shadowed a crew once that had a targeting foul in the first half that they went to replay at half and confirmed. But that's the closest I've ever gotten to this one. So I think this is a rule that for the casual fan. Is that I don't know, is that a pejorative term? Uh, if you're able to watch a game on TV, chances are they're going to have replay, right? Um, so this is probably going to apply to that. The games that we work, we're not there yet, but maybe it's not too far down the line. So it's a good rule to be mindful of as we're going forward. But, really the change here is just sort of an emphasis on how that disqualification, what is the carryover for that, as Michael said. So we're looking at the postseason, looking into eligibility the following season as well. There's still the right for the instant replay official at the game, or for subsequently for the national coordinator of officials to review and make a determination whether the disqualification was accurate or not, and should actually be enforced subsequently, or if it was incorrect. And therefore, the player should be eligible for their next game, should that be the postseason or the following season.
Another big change is blocking below the waist, and I know this is one that I've always had to read what seems like before every game, just so I can have it right in my head. And thankfully, I like this rule change. I guess you're tuning into this not to hear whether or not I like the rules, just what the rules are. So I guess I'll be quiet. But I think this simplifies the rule a little bit more. Obviously, when we have a kick play or a change of possession, right, there's no blocking below the waist on that, so that doesn't change. But the new aspect is any lineman with an initial position completely inside the tackle box can legally block below the waist inside that tackle box on that initial charge. So firing right up the ball, they can make that block. And that block is initiated within 1 yard beyond the neutral zone, is still considered within the tackle box. After that initial charge, these linemen can block below the waist within the tackle box until the ball leaves the tackle box, if the force is directed from the front. And that's the ever popular 10 and 2 that we talk about. So the secondary component of this is that any stationary back that's lined up within the tackle box may also block below the waist within the tackle box until the ball leaves the tackle box. And again, that contact again has to be from the front. Again, 10 and 2 as we talked about there. Everybody else on Team A is not allowed to block below the waist. It's just that simple, and I think that helps simplify it for short wings, deep wings, back judges. I think it makes the game safer and just easier to officiate. So less complicated, I think, is always better. So on the flip side of the ball, Team B can also block below the waist as long as they're within a yard of the line of scrimmage and inside that tackle box. So linebackers, defensive backs, they're out, but anybody up front can. So.
Yeah, I think this is one of my favorite rule changes that's come, I don't know, maybe the whole time I've been officiating. The hardest plays that I've had the last 2 seasons were 2 very close to 5-yard downfield blocks by wide receivers. And if you're thinking of line of scrimmage official or the short wings, think through what all we're thinking through, right? So you've got the 3-yard belt for ineligible for lineman downfield blocking, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be mindful of 3 yards. You got to be mindful of 5 yards in the past with wide receivers or a back blocking out on a cornerback or something. With the old blocking below the waist rules, it was legal within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. It was illegal if it was more than 5 yards downfield. So this makes, selfishly, it makes my position a little bit easier. It takes away one of those difficult calls that we had. But it's really sort of bringing it closer in line to high school, right? So high school, we had that change last year where, the blocking below the waist or clipping or whatever, it has to be on that initial charge. So we're getting closer to that here, right? So now it's constrained to the tackle box. The initial charge is one of those things, but if they leave and come back, or if it's delayed, then it's got to be from the front 10 and 2. So it's a safety issue, right? So the whole idea of the 10 and 2 is you want to make sure the defender knows what's coming and can protect himself as best he can. You don't want those hits from the side or from the back. That's where bad injuries happen. But I think this is as you said, Michael, it simplifies the rule quite a bit. I think it makes it easier on the officials, which shouldn't be the primary thought for a rule. But I think it makes the game safer too, because it's taking away some of those dangerous blocks out on the perimeter as well. So a good rule change that I'm very appreciative of, and I think is going to make our jobs a bit easier this year and going forward.
I think it's important with this change specifically too, pregame your formations and understand what the offenses are trying to run. If they have that H-back, what are they doing? Because if he's in or outside the tackle box, it changes on what he can and can't do.
Right.
If you're lucky enough, like we have, I know we use radios, so your back judge might be able to get on the radio and communicate. If there's time prior to the snap, getting in and just communicating whether or not the back is in or out of the tackle box, and just understanding where players are can help officiate this.
Yeah, and not to overly complicate this, not that it's not our nature to do it, but if you're a member of CFO and have access to Steve Shaw's videos every week, he went through some of these rule changes and spent some time on this one because this is probably the biggest rule change, or at least in my opinion, the biggest rule change for this season. But one of the things that he noted was a play where it was a tackle over play. So the left tackle moved to the right side, the tight end moved down. So the tight end was where the left tackle would normally be. So even though it's a tight end, not a tackle, he's in the tackle box because he's in the traditional tackle position. So then on the right side, you had a guard and two tackles. So the traditional right tackle, he's in the tackle box, but the second tackle, who's now to his right, where a tight end might normally be, he's outside of the tackle box, right? The tackle box doesn't extend if you have two tackles. The tackle box is just traditionally, you have a center and then you have two linemen on each side. So that's a little bit complex. You're not going to see that every play. You're probably not going to see that every game. That might be a couple times a season thing, but just be mindful, especially with this rule, where the tackle box is. If you've got some funky formation with extra tackles or extra linemen or weird rearrangements of your linemen, it's a center. Go two linemen out on each side, and there's your tackle box for this. Well, I think that's the biggest change this season. Another one that I think is pretty significant is the change to the enforcement of unsportsmanlike conduct fouls. What this does is that this one's going to apply on pass plays. This is going to bring the enforcement of unsportsmanlike conduct fouls in line on pass plays and kick plays. So in the past, if there was a completed pass, the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty would be a choice, right? You take the result of the play or you can take the unsportsmanlike conduct foul. Now you can tack it on at the end. So you can have a 20-yard pass that's successfully completed. If you've got a 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct foul on the defense, you can then enforce that, whether it's 15 or half the distance, whatever your traditional penalty enforcement is, you can tack it on now to the end of that.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, too, it's got to be unsportsmanlike conduct fouls, right? If you get your traditional just defensive pass interference, your spot of enforcement there is still from the previous spot. So
right.
Something not to get confused on there.
Yeah, like you said, and thinking through that and thinking in the past. So in the past, a personal foul and an unsportsmanlike conduct foul, despite both being 15-yard penalties, were treated differently on these types of plays if you had a pass that gained more than 15 yards. So this is really just sort of cleaning it up and having equal enforcement here of the foul. This doesn't change anything else in terms of general penalty enforcement. If you've got a flagrant offender or something that requires ejection, you can still have ejections there. Now, if you have a free or scrimmage kick, if there's a team A foul, you can enforce this unsportsmanlike conduct foul now either at the previous spot or if it's a scrimmage kick that crosses the neutral zone, the spot where the subsequent dead ball belongs to Team B.
That change is kind of similar with what we can expect moving. I think the rule states about all fouls other than kick catching interference, can be replayed at the previous spot or enforces the enforcement subsequent spot where it belongs to be. So it brings it all in line. So we have just a similar way to enforce that. It's one of those exceptions we have to think of. Right.
We have another penalty change this year, and this is going to apply to defensive holding. So when we have defensive holding, the current rule would be an automatic first down only in situations where a pass crosses the neutral zone and the defense commits a holding foul against an eligible receiver, and the foul is beyond the neutral zone before the ball is touched. This new rule, it just simplifies the enforcement. Holding by the defense is an automatic first down. So you don't have to think through, did the ball cross the neutral zone? Was the foul beyond the neutral zone? Was it an eligible receiver? Was the ball touched first? It's simply, if there's defensive holding, you're going to have an automatic first down if the first down isn't in conflict with other rules. So it's automatic first down, 10 yards. The 10 yards doesn't change for defensive holding. It's just now defensive holding is an automatic first down. I think the one area we need to think through on this, though, would be holding by the defensive line, right? So you could have a defensive tackle. Now, it's a rare penalty, right? But the defensive tackle that holds that guard and prevents him from pulling or getting downfield, or perhaps more likely to be an issue would be a defensive lineman holding on a field goal attempt, right? So if you've got a 4th and 3 and there's a field goal attempt and you've got that pull and shoot, that's going to be an automatic first down now. Perhaps 4th and 3 wasn't the best example. Let's say you had 4th and 13, right? So you had 4th and 13. The defense pulls and shoots on that field goal. It's only a 10-yard penalty, but it's an automatic first down now. So that's going to be a big change that we'll have to be mindful of this year, as we approach these new rules. In addition to the rules, though, there's also going to be some editorial changes. So I'm going to turn that back over to Michael for those.
Yeah, so the first one coming off is the coach's booth, and this isn't really something that is going to be our concern too much. This is going to be more game management, but just talks about coach's booth on both teams needing to be about the same size, so that way one team doesn't have a distinct advantage there. So I won't talk too much in depth on that because, again, that is a little bit outside of our jurisdiction. So.
Yeah, we're not going to be enforcing that one. But if a coach complains, then that's one where you go to the game management to share your brilliant knowledge of these editorial changes to state this is what it needs to be. Go do it.
Sure. The other one, similar to targeting, another thing we're always working on, it seems, is defensive player and just identifying that. So this year they are looking at the passer, so to protect a defensive player that's in a passing posture. They're going to update that rule so that's more in line with just how today's game is being played. So when in question, a player, of course, is always defenseless. And examples of a defenseless player now could be a player in the active or just throwing a pass, or anyone that is in any sort of passing posture with their focus downfield. And that's kind of the tweak there. Obviously, that player who might be scanning the field, whether it's the quarterback or maybe it's a halfback who's taking a pass, or a receiver who's coming across, or a reverse, somebody who has their eyes downfield and isn't really alert of their immediate surroundings, we're classifying them as defenseless now.
Yeah, I don't think this is that big a change. And quite frankly, I've heard a lot of people say they thought this was the rule anyway.
I might be guilty of that too.
Beforehand. So this doesn't revolutionize the defenseless player. It just sort of spells out that it's not just somebody throwing a pass or with the arm cocked back. It's someone who's scanning the field, looking around, because obviously the whole idea of a defenseless player is that you can't protect yourself. So if you're looking downfield, then you're not looking at a player coming at your knees, right? You're very well missing that or missing something there. So just spelling out what I think a lot of us kind of thought was the rule anyway before this.
Another one is the fumble at rest. I don't know if I've ever seen a fumble at rest. I guess it's possible, but we've all seen like a kick at rest. So think in that term, if you have a punt where nobody's coming to secure. But if you had a fumble, let's say at rest, if you get nobody attempting to secure it, we're just declaring it dead, and it belongs to the team that fumbled at that spot, right? So in this case, we're going to make a change that kind of mirrors the rest of the rules concerning fumbles. So if we have a backward pass that comes to rest inbounds and no player attempts to secure it, the ball is going to be dead and belongs to the passing team at that spot where it becomes dead. So if you were at the -40 and you had a backwards pass and it comes to rest at the -38, we're going to declare it dead there, and team A will retain possession. So now if we have a fumble coming to rest inbounds and no player attempts to secure it, if it's in advance of the spot of the fumble, the ball belongs to the fumbling team at the spot of the fumble. So using our good mechanics, we're going to have a beanbag down and we'll know exactly where to come back to. If the fumble is behind the spot where the player lost possession, then the ball is going to be given back to the fumbling team at that spot. So again, it just lines itself up with the rest of the way we treat fumbles.
Yeah, it's not really a revolutionary rule, but it's just it brings everything in line. Yeah, it clarifies what quite frankly I think a lot of people would have thought beforehand anyway. Obviously, bringing it back is going to be a little bit of a change, but it makes sense in light of the other rules that we deal with.
And I think most players, if they see a fumble, they're jumping on it anyway. So I
Right,
think most
right.
fumbles are playing.
Right. A couple more editorial changes this year. One deals with the crown of the helmet. This change is really contemplating sort of new helmets that have the face mask sort of built in as opposed to attached to the front and the top of the front of the helmet, just because helmet design is changing so fast. And, the old rules that we had where it was just above that bumper plate on the front and then going all the way around, that was the crown, it may not be applicable with some of the new designs. So now the crown of the helmet, it's the apex of the helmet. So if you think of just the very highest point on the helmet, take a 6-inch radius from that, draw a circle around the helmet. That's what we mean by the crown. It's sort of hard to picture. I think in practice, it's easier to think through sort of. I think the way that Steve Shaw explained it on the video for this was that the targeting rule wasn't really contemplated for sort of glancing blows that, weren't really a matter of lowering the crown or lowering the apex of the helmet. Those are the plays where we're protecting both the person getting hit as well as the person delivering that blow, right? But sometimes in the course of action, it's just you might have sides of helmets that hit inadvertently. That's not going to be considered the crown of the helmet. So it's the apex, draw down 6 inches, a 6-inch radius, make a circle around that. That's going to be the crown. So that's going to be, of course, applicable to those crown of the helmet targeting fouls, the 913s. The 914s where we're trying to think through the situations where we have action at the helmet that also comes with one indicator, whether we have a crouch, a launch, could have crown, something there. That rule is not going to change. So this is really going to be a change for 913, just in terms of how we're thinking through what is the crown of the helmet, and did that person delivering that blow lower the crown of the helmet and lead with the crown. Instant replay, clock adjustment. Again, this isn't something that we deal with at our level of Division III, but something that you'll see if you're watching a game or working at higher levels. So the replay official can address any clock adjustment and status when a ruling is reviewed with less than 2 minutes in the second quarter or the fourth quarter. So really, it's just giving that replay official the right to look at the clock if there's some review that takes place in the last 2 minutes of either half. Finally, and this may be one of the most minor changes this year, there's a new signal for an illegal blindside block. If you know the high school signal, that's now the college signal. So it's a personal foul, so it's still the X's with the forearms for your personal foul chop. And then blindside block is where you take your fist and you bring your fist together in front of your chest. So it's just like high school now. One of those instances where college is imitating high school as opposed to high school imitating college, I suppose. But as far as what is an illegal blindside block, none of that has changed. So again, that rule is going to be the same. We have to be mindful of things that are, that player with the brick in his hand, the player that has that cutback or something where the person getting blocked doesn't see him coming, and the person blocking, delivers that blow with the shoulder or some forceful hit that, when we see it, we know qualifies as a illegal blindside block.
You know it when you see it. Exactly.
You know it when you see it. And one thing that we know at this point is that that's the end of this episode, because we've covered all the rule changes for high school and college for the upcoming season. We want to thank you for joining us once again for this episode of Learn Your Stripes. As always, we're going to leave you with a play to consider.
Okay, B40 intercepts a pass at Team B's 4-yard line. His momentum is taking him towards his own end zone when he fumbles the ball on the 1-yard line. And, two scenarios here. Either B40, the fumbler, recovers the fumble in his end zone and is down. Or B45, a teammate of the fumbler, recovers the fumble in the end zone itself and then is down. So, what's your ruling in high school, college? And I'll say who's going to be next to put the ball in play.
That's a good point. We're not going to get clock status here. That's unnecessary for this play. If you can get the ruling right and know who's next to put the ball in play, then you're doing awfully well. And of course, we're going to discuss that play at the start of our next episode. In the meantime, if you want to let us know what your ruling would be, or if you have any questions or feel we made a mistake, please email us at learnyourstripes@gmail.com. You can find us on your app of choice, or obtain episodes or an RSS link to directly download all episodes into your app of choice at learnyourstripespodcast.com. Please also follow us on Facebook at Learn Your Stripes Podcast, on Instagram at the same name, and on Twitter at LYS_podcast. If you enjoy our podcast, please tell your friends and rate us 5 stars and leave a review on your app of choice. We'll see you back here in a few weeks. In the meantime, keep learning your stripes.